Chapter 1. The crimson death. The rain came down like judgment itself, cold and merciless, against the cracked pavement of Hollowgate's industrial district. Amara pressed her back against the brick wall of the alley behind Obsidian Hall, the exclusive club where she'd worked past tense now for 3 years. Her uniform clung to her skin, soaked through, and her fingers trembled as they clutched the envelope containing her final paycheck. -2 weeks' wages. Penalty for gross misconduct. Her crime? Helping a bleeding man into a private room instead of calling security. The memory flickered behind her eyes, the stranger stumbling through the service entrance. His pristine black suit, torn at the shoulder. Dark liquid. She'd thought it was blood staining the fabric. His face had been pale as moonlight, beautiful in a way that made her throat tight. And his eyes. God, those eyes. Silver gray and ancient, holding depths that made her 26 years feel like nothing. Please, he'd said, his accent unfamiliar, each word carefully shaped. Just a moment. They're hunting me. She should have called security, should have followed protocol. But something in his face, desperation mixed with dignity, had reminded her of herself 6 months ago when Marcus had emptied their joint account and disappeared with her sister. When the world had labeled her stupid for trusting, naive for believing. So she'd helped him, led him to the unused storage room on the 3rd floor, brought him water and a clean towel, left him there with a promise to check back in 20 minutes. When she'd returned, he was gone. The room was empty except for a single black card on the floor, embossed with silver lettering she couldn't read. And her manager had been waiting in the hallway, his face purple with rage. Do you have any idea who you could have endangered? Sal had hissed. What he could have done. You're done, Amara. Pack your things. Now, 3 hours later, she stood in the rain with nowhere to go. Her apartment, Marcus's apartment, technically, though his name was on a lease in another state, now had a new tenant moving in tomorrow. Her mother's house in Georgia was 800 miles away, and Amara had sworn she'd never go back there. Never admit defeat. Never prove them right about her foolish, trusting heart. A sound echoed from the mouth of the alley. Footsteps, quick and purposeful. Multiple sets. Amara's pulse quickened. This part of town wasn't safe after dark. Everyone knew that. The stories whispered in break rooms and corner stores, people disappearing, bodies found drained. The police always calling it gang violence or drug deals gone wrong. She pressed deeper into the shadows, making herself small against the wall. The footsteps grew closer. 3 figures emerged from the rain, their movements too smooth to coordinated. They wore dark clothes that seemed to drink in the streetlight, and something about the way they moved made her stomach drop. She was here, one of them said, a woman's voice, sharp and cold. I can smell her on the bricks. The blood trader's witness. Then she's forfeit, another replied, male, his tone casual. Marchant's laws. Anyone who aids a condemned vampire shares his punishment. Vampire. The word hung in the air like a blade. Amara's breath caught. She wanted to laugh, to dismiss it as nonsense, but her body knew better. Her body remembered the stranger's too pale skin, the way his pupils had caught the light like a cat's, the unnatural grace in his movements. There, the 3rd figure pointed directly at her hiding spot. They moved impossibly fast. Amara ran. Her feet slipped on the wet pavement, her lungs burning as she sprinted toward the street. Behind her, she heard no footsteps, only the whisper of displaced air, the sense of something closing in. A hand caught her shoulder, spinning her around. The woman from before stood inches away, her face beautiful and terrible, her teeth, oh God, her teeth elongated into points that gleamed in the darkness. The House of Thorn does not forgive trespasses, the woman whispered. Your death will send him a message. Amara opened her mouth to scream, but no sound came. The woman's fingers dug into her shoulder, nails sharp enough to pierce fabric and skin. Pain bloomed hot and immediate, then the woman was gone, torn away by a shadow that moved like liquid darkness. The stranger from the club stood between Amara and her attackers. He'd changed clothes, black pants, a black shirt that emphasized the sharp angles of his frame, but his face was the same. Pale and perfect and utterly inhuman in the rain. Kieran, the male vampire said, and there was surprise in his voice. You shouldn't be here. The council's verdict was clear. The council, Kieran replied softly, his accent more pronounced now, can challenge me themselves if they take issue with my choices. You 3 are merely House Thorn's attack dogs. Stand down, the female vampire hissed. She helped you escape your execution. That makes her complicit in saving my life, Kieran interrupted. which means she falls under my protection. Ancient law, Celeste. Older than your house's petty politics. A life debt supersedes territorial claims. The three vampires exchanged glances. Something passed between them, some silent communication Amara couldn't parse through her shock and terror. Finally, they stepped back. This isn't over, Celeste said. The thorn will come for both of you. They vanished into the rain as suddenly as they'd appeared, leaving Amara trembling against the alley wall and Kieran standing like a statue before her. Slowly, he turned to face her. His gray eyes held something that might have been regret. I apologize, he said quietly. You showed me kindness, and I've brought war to your door. Amara's voice came out raw. What are you? Damned, he replied. Then softer. And in your debt. Which means, Miss Amara Clark, whether you wish it or not, your life has just become infinitely more complicated. Chapter 2. Sanctuary of Shadow. Kieran's apartment, if it could be called that, occupied the entire top floor of a building that looked abandoned from the street. Amara's legs had barely carried her up the 7 flights of stairs, her body still shaking from adrenaline and shock. He'd offered to carry her. She'd refused, clinging to what little dignity she had left. Now she stood in the center of a vast loft space that seemed designed to contradict every vampire stereotype she'd ever heard. Floor-to-ceiling windows lined the eastern wall, currently shuttered behind heavy blackout curtains. Books filled custom shelves that climbed toward the exposed beam ceiling. A kitchen area gleamed with unused appliances, decorative, she realized, because what use did vampires have for food? Sit, Kieran said, gesturing toward a leather sofa near the fireplace. He moved to the windows, checking each curtain's seal with methodical precision. You're safe here. The building is warded. Old magic. Older than the city. They can't enter without invitation. Amara remained standing, her arms wrapped around herself. Her shoulder throbbed where Celeste's nails had broken skin. What just happened? What are you? He paused, his back still to her. In the dim light from the scattered lamps, she could see the tension in his shoulders, the rigid control in every line of his body. I'm a vampire, he said simply. 5th-generation progeny of the House of Ash. 247 years old, as humans count time. And as of 3 nights ago, condemned to death by the Council of Houses for refusing an arranged blood bond with House Thorn's heir. The words should have sounded insane. They should have sent her running back into the rain. Consequences be damned. Instead, Amara found herself asking, why did you refuse? Kieran turned then, and something flickered across his face, surprise perhaps, that she'd asked about his choice rather than his nature. Because blood bonds are sacred. They require consent, not coercion. And I will not be used as a political pawn to merge 2 houses that have been enemies for centuries. He moved to a cabinet, withdrawing a first aid kit that looked suspiciously well stocked for someone who didn't need medical supplies. Your shoulder, may I? Amara hesitated, then nodded. He approached slowly, giving her time to retreat if she wanted. When he was close enough that she could feel the cold radiating from his skin, no body heat, she realized with a chill. He paused. I need to remove your jacket, he said quietly. I won't hurt you. You're a vampire, she whispered. You drink blood. How can you promise not to hurt me? His gray eyes met hers, and she saw ancient weariness there, layered beneath the careful politeness. Because I choose not to. Every night, every interaction, every moment. I choose. Something in his voice steadied her. Amara shrugged out of her soaked jacket, wincing as the movement pulled at her injured shoulder. Kieran's hands were gentle as he examined the wounds, his touch cold but careful. Not deep, he murmured. Celeste wanted to frighten you, not kill you. Not yet. He cleaned the scratches with antiseptic, his movements practiced. I'm sorry. This is my fault. I should never have come to Obsidian Hall, should never have put you in danger. Why did you? Amara asked, watching his face as he worked. Why there? Because it's neutral territory. The club is owned by House Ember, which maintains strict non-intervention policies. I thought I could hide there for a few hours, long enough to plan my next move. His mouth twisted. I didn't account for their security protocols. Or for someone like you. Someone like me? He finished bandagging her shoulder and stepped back, putting careful distance between them. Someone who helps a stranger without asking questions. Someone with kindness left in them. He turned away, moving toward the kitchen. I've lived long enough to know that's rare, Amara watched him retrieve a bottle of water from the refrigerator stocked for human guests, she assumed, and bring it to her. His movements were too fluid, too precise, inhuman and mesmerizing at once. What happens now? She asked, accepting the water. Her throat was raw from running. Now you stay here until dawn. They can't enter without invitation, and they won't risk attacking during daylight hours. Too many human witnesses. He moved to the windows again, as if he couldn't help checking them. Tomorrow, I'll arrange protection for you. There are older laws, older than the council. A life debt means you keep saying that, Amara interrupted. Life debt. What does it mean? Kieran was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of something ancient and binding. When a human saves a vampire's life, truly saves it, at personal cost, a debt is formed. Blood magic, older than civilization. It means I'm bound to protect you until the debt is repaid. It means any vampire who harms you declares war on me personally. And House Thorn will have to decide if killing you is worth the consequences. His expression darkened. They're bold, but not foolish. The life debt law is sacred. Breaking it would turn every house against them. Amara sank onto the sofa, her legs finally giving out. The enormity of it crashed over her. Vampires were real. She'd stumbled into their politics, and her simple act of kindness had bound her to an immortal creature who was being hunted for refusing an arranged marriage. I lost my job for helping you, she said, and hated how small her voice sounded. I lost my apartment. I lost everything, and now I'm running from vampires because I gave you a towel and 20 minutes of peace. Kieran crossed the room in 2 impossibly fast strides and knelt before her, putting himself at eye level. The movement was so sudden, so unexpected, that Amara pressed back against the sofa. I know, he said, and for the first time, she heard genuine emotion in his voice, regret, sharp and deep. I know what my existence has cost you. And I swear on the ashes of my house, on 2 centuries of honor, I will not let them take anything more. You saved me when death would have been a mercy. Let me return the favor. His eyes held hers, and Amara saw something beneath the vampire. Beneath the ancient being she saw loneliness. Bone deep and eternal. How? She whispered. By keeping you alive, he said simply. And by teaching you the rules of a world you never asked to enter. Starting tonight, outside, the rain continued its relentless assault. Inside, surrounded by books and shadows and a vampire who knelt before her like a knight from a forgotten age, Amara made a choice. Okay, she breathed. Teach me. Something that might have been relief crossed Kieran's face. He rose, offering her his hand, cold and steady and surprisingly solid. Then we begin with the most important rule, he said. In the world of vampires, consent is everything. Feeding, bonding, entering spaces, taking blood. Everything requires permission freely given. Remember that, and you'll survive. Amara took his hand, letting him pull her to her feet. Her life as she'd known it was over. But standing in this strange sanctuary, with rain drumming against sealed windows and a vampire promising protection, she felt something she hadn't felt in months. She felt like she mattered. Chapter 3. Lessons in Darkness. Dawn came without fanfare, just a gradual lightening of the sealed room that Amara sensed more than saw. She'd spent the night curled on Kieran's sofa, wrapped in a blanket that smelled of cedar and something older, incense, maybe, or preserved time. Sleep had come in fragments, broken by the strange sounds of the building settling and her own spiraling thoughts. When she finally opened her eyes, Kieran was standing at the eastern windows, perfectly still, his hand resting against the heavy curtain as if testing something she couldn't perceive. You're awake, he said, without turning around. I apologize for the accommodations. I don't often have house guests. Amara sat up, wincing at the stiffness in her shoulder. Do you ever have house guests? Not in 30 years. He dropped his hand from the curtain and turned to face her. In the lamplight, she could see the shadows under his eyes more clearly, not dark circles exactly, but a deepening of the hollows in his face. He looked tired, if vampires could be tired. The sun is up. I'll need to rest soon. But first, we should establish some ground rules. He moved to the kitchen area, and Amara noticed for the first time how carefully he controlled his speed, deliberately slowing his movements to something approximating human. It was oddly considerate, this attempt not to frighten her with what he was. There's coffee, he said, gesturing to a French press, and a bag of beans that looked expensive. The refrigerator is stocked with food. Help yourself to anything. The bathroom is through that door. There are clean clothes in the dresser, left from before. They may fit. Before what? Kieran paused, his back to her. Before I realized that keeping human things around was a way of pretending I was still connected to that world, that I still belonged to daylight. The loneliness in his voice made Amara's chest ache. She stood, wrapping the blanket around her shoulders like armor, and moved toward the kitchen. You said you'd teach me about vampire rules. Yes. He watched her measure coffee into the press with an intensity that made her self-conscious. Rule 1. You already know consent. It governs everything in our world. Without consent, feeding is assault. Blood bonds become slavery. Even entering a human dwelling requires invitation. He tilted his head slightly. That's why I asked if I could treat your wound. Every touch requires permission. Amara poured hot water over the grounds, watching them bloom. What about when you grabbed me in the alley? You didn't ask permission. Emergency circumstances override the formality. Your life was in immediate danger. His expression darkened. But you're right to question it. Some vampires use emergency as justification for all manner of violations. I try not to. She met his eyes. Try? I've lived for 2.5 centuries, Amara. I'm not perfect, but I'm trying to be better than what my nature demands. He moved to the windows again, that same restless checking. Which brings us to rule 2, never fully trust a vampire's control. We're predators. The hunger is always there beneath everything. Most of us manage it. Well, some don't. And you? She poured coffee into a mug he'd set out fine porcelain, painted with roses. Do you manage it well? I haven't killed an innocent in 193 years. His voice was flat, factual. I feed with consent, from willing donors who understand the risks. I follow the old codes, because without them, we're just monsters in expensive clothes. Amara sipped her coffee, letting the bitter warmth ground her. You keep talking about codes and houses and rules. Explain it to me. The structure. Kieran seemed to consider this, then moved to the bookshelves and withdrew a leather-bound journal. He opened it to a page covered in elaborate handwriting and sketches of family tree, she realized. But not like any she'd seen before. There are 5 great houses, he began, settling into a chair across from her with the careful posture of someone about to deliver a lecture. Ash, thorn, ember, silver, and nightshade. Each house was founded centuries ago by an elder, the first-generation vampires, turned by methods now lost. I'm House Ash, descended through 5 generations from Elder Morgan. He traced the lines on the page. Houses maintain territories, form alliances, negotiate treaties. We have our own courts, our own justice systems. The council consists of representatives from each house. They settle disputes, enforce ancient laws, and yes, occasionally condemn vampires to death for political inconvenience. And House Thorn wanted you to marry their heir, Amara said slowly. To merge houses, blood bond, not marry. It's more binding than human marriage. His finger lingered on a name in the journal, Lysandra Thorn. When 2 vampires exchange blood in a ritual bond, they share thoughts, feelings, memories. They become linked on a level humans can't comprehend. It's meant to be sacred, consensual, but the houses have been arranging political bonds for centuries, treating it like any other contract. And you refused. I refused. He closed the journal with deliberate care. Lysandra Thorn is cruel. She's killed humans for sport, broken the consent laws repeatedly, used her position to terrorize weaker vampires. The council overlooks it because House Thorn controls the largest territory on the eastern seaboard. They wanted me bonded to her to bring House Ash under Thorn's influence. Amara set down her coffee. So they condemned you to death instead. Politics, Kieran said with bitter amusement. The council will execute me publicly to appease House Thorn, demonstrating their authority and eliminating a vampire who dared to defy tradition. He met her eyes. That's what you walked into when you helped me. A power struggle centuries in the making. She should have been terrified. Should have demanded he let her leave, find her own way, escape this nightmare. Instead, she found herself asking, what's rule 3? Something shifted in Kieran's expression, surprise giving way to what might have been respect. Rule 3 is the most important one for humans in our world. Trust your instincts. If a vampire feels wrong, if they make your skin crawl, if something in you screams danger, listen to it. Humans have survival instincts we've learned to suppress. Don't ignore them. My instincts told me to help you, Amara said quietly. Kieran was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, His voice was softer than she'd yet heard it. Then your instincts are either very wise or very foolish. I haven't decided which. The building creaked around them. Outside, Amara heard the distant sounds of the city waking cars, voices. The normal world continuing while she sat in a vampire's sanctuary, learning rules to a reality she'd never imagined. I need to sleep, Kieran said abruptly. He stood, moving toward a doorway she hadn't noticed before. I'll be unconscious until sunset, completely vulnerable. The door will be locked, but you should know if someone breaks the wards and enters, I won't be able to protect you until dark. Amara's pulse quickened. You're telling me I'll be alone? Undefended? I'm telling you the truth. He paused in the doorway. The wards are strong. They've held for 70 years. And the life debt means other vampires will hesitate before attacking. But yes, until sunset, you'll be alone. If you want to leave, the door is there. I won't stop you. He was giving her a choice. Testing her, maybe, or simply being honest about the limitations of his protection. Amara looked at the door, then back at Kieran's shadowed face. I'll stay, she heard herself say. For now. Something that might have been relief crossed his features. Then make yourself comfortable. Read, sleep, eat. Just don't open the curtains. A ghost of a smile touched his mouth. And if you do decide to leave, lock the door behind you. Even monsters deserve security. He disappeared into the darkness beyond the door. Amara heard a lock click, final and absolute. She was alone in a vampire's apartment, with dawnlight trying to penetrate sealed windows and her entire life in ruins behind her, and somehow, impossibly, she felt safer than she had in months. Chapter 4. Threads of the past. The hours of daylight stretched strange and surreal. Amara found herself wandering Kieran's apartment like a ghost, touching the spines of books and languages she couldn't read, examining photographs in silver frames that showed places but never people. The kitchen yielded fresh fruit, bread, cheese, provisions purchased, she realized, specifically for her. He'd known she would stay, or hoped she would. She showered in his marble bathroom, finding women's clothes in the dresser as promised, jeans that fit almost perfectly, a soft gray sweater that smelled of cedar. The discovery raised questions she wasn't ready to ask. Had there been another woman here? Someone he'd cared for? Someone who'd left, or worse? By noon, she'd exhausted her exploration and settled on the sofa with coffee and one of the few English books she'd found, a worn copy of Dracula that made her laugh darkly at the irony. She'd made it through 3 chapters when she noticed the journal Kieran had shown her earlier, still resting on the side table where he'd left it. She shouldn't look. It was private, personal, probably filled with things he'd never consent to share. But her fingers itched with curiosity about the man, the vampire who'd upended her world, who spoke of honor and codes while being hunted by his own kind. Amara opened the journal. The first pages were lists, names, dates, locations, records of feeding, she realized with a chill. Each entry meticulously documented. Margaret S., July 1847, Boston. Consent given. Payment rendered. No harm done. Page after page of the same careful notation, spanning decades. The handwriting changed over time, evolving from formal script to something more modern, but the care remained consistent. Then she found the other entries. Personal notes, scattered among the records. 1889, October. Another decade passes. The world changes so quickly now. Trains crossing continents, electric lights replacing gas lamps. I change not at all. Morrigan says this is our curse, to be eternal while everything we touch turns to dust. 19-3, March. I attended a jazz club tonight. The music reminded me of being human, of feeling rhythms in my chest instead of eternal silence. I stayed too long. A woman asked me to dance. I had to refuse. How do you explain that your body no longer remembers how to be warm? 1956, December. Lysandra Thorne visited House Ash. The council is pressuring Morrigan to consider an alliance. Lysandra looked at me like I was prey. I told Morrigan I would rather face the sun than bond with her. She laughed and said I was being dramatic. Perhaps, but I know predators when I see them. Lysandra doesn't want a partner. She wants a possession. Amara's fingers traced the words, her heart, aching at the loneliness, threaded through each entry. She flipped forward, looking for more recent pages. 2019, April. I've been thinking about the human I killed in 1832. I still remember his name. Thomas Brennan, a dock worker in Charleston. I was young, arrogant, convinced I had perfect control. I was wrong. His widow remarried, eventually, had 3 more children. Does that absolve me? Does the continuation of life balance the one I took? I don't think it does. 2005, February. The council's ultimatum came tonight. Accept the blood bond with Lysandra or face execution. Morrigan won't intervene, she's too old, too tired of house politics. I have 3 days to decide between slavery and death. I find myself choosing death. At least it has dignity. The entry ended there. 3 days later, he'd stumbled into Obsidian Hall, fleeing the sentence she'd unknowingly helped him escape. Amara closed the journal carefully, her hands shaking. The vampire sleeping beyond that locked door wasn't a monster from stories. He was a person lonely, principled, carrying centuries of regret and trying desperately to be better than his nature demanded. She understood that. God help her, she understood it intimately. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She'd plugged it into charge earlier, surprised to find Kieran had modern conveniences despite his obvious nostalgia for the past. 7 missed calls from her mother, 3 texts from friends asking if she was okay, and 1 message from an unknown number. You can't hide forever, little witness. House Thorn remembers its enemies. Amara's blood went cold. They had her number, which meant they probably had more: her mother's address, her friends' locations, every connection she'd ever made. The life debt protected her. But what about everyone else? She was still staring at the message when she heard the lock click. Kieran emerged from his room, moving slower than usual, his hair disheveled and his eyes still shadowed with sleep. He stopped when he saw her face. What's wrong? Wordlessly, Amara handed him the phone. She watched his expression harden as he read the message, something dangerous flickering behind his careful control. They're escalating, he said quietly. Trying to frighten you into leaving my protection. Classic Thorn tactics: intimidate the weak link until it breaks. He looked up, meeting her eyes. Are you frightened? Terrified, Amara admitted, but also angry. I didn't ask for any of this. I don't deserve to be threatened for showing basic human decency. Something like approval crossed his face. No, you don't. He handed back the phone. I need to make some calls. Reach out to old allies. See who might stand against House Thorn if this escalates further. It'll take time, but I read your journal, Amara interrupted. Kieran went completely still. For a moment, she saw something vulnerable flash across his face: exposure, perhaps, or violation. Then his expression smoothed into careful neutrality. I see. I'm sorry, she said quickly. I shouldn't have. It was private, and I invaded your privacy, and I'm sorry. But I needed to understand who you are, what you are. And his voice was flat, guarded. What did you learn? Amara stood, closing the distance between them until she was close enough to see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, the inhuman stillness of his chest. That you've been alone for a very long time. That you carry guilt for things you can't change. That you're trying to be honorable in a world that doesn't value honor anymore. Kieran's jaw tightened. You make me sound noble. I'm not. I'm a vampire who's killed people and will likely kill again. The hunger doesn't disappear just because I've developed a conscience. I know. Amara thought of Marcus, of the way he'd smiled while draining their accounts, of her sister's text message that simply said, sorry, he made me feel alive. I know what it's like to be betrayed by your own nature, to want to be better than what you are. Something shifted in the air between them. Kieran studied her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. You're not what I expected, he said finally. When I realized you'd saved me, I assumed you'd run the moment you understood the danger. Most humans would. Most humans haven't lost everything already, Amara replied. You can't threaten someone who has nothing left to lose. That's not true. His voice dropped lower, almost gentle. You have your life. Don't think I've forgotten what that's worth. Before she could respond, the lights flickered. Once, twice, then steadied. Kieran's head snapped toward the windows, his entire body tensing. The wards, he said. Someone's testing them. Amara's heart hammered. House Thorn? Or worse. He moved to the windows with inhuman speed, pressing his palm against the wall beside the curtain. The wards are holding, but they're being probed. Systematically. Someone's looking for weaknesses. What do we do? Kieran turned back to her, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw genuine fear in his ancient eyes. We prepare, he said. Because if they break through, things are going to get very dangerous, very quickly. Chapter 5. Breaking points. Lights flickered again, longer this time. Amara watched shadows dance across Kieran's face as he stood frozen by the windows, his hands still pressed against the wall. In the 3 seconds of darkness, she felt the temperature in the room drop not gradually, but all at once, as if something cold and vast had pressed against the building's exterior. When the lights returned, Kieran was moving, pulling her away from the windows toward the center of the apartment. "Stay here," he commanded. "Don't move. Don't make noise. If they break through," "You said the wards were strong," Amara interrupted, hating the tremor in her voice. 70 years, you said. Wards can be broken by those who know the old magics." He was at the bookshelf now, pulling volumes aside to reveal a hidden compartment. Inside lay objects that gleamed dully in the lamplight: silver stakes, a curved blade, vials of liquid that caught the light strangely. "House Thorn has access to blood witches. If they're willing to pay the price, the wards won't hold." He withdrew the blade, testing its weight with the casual familiarity of someone who'd used it many times before. The sight sent ice through Amara's veins. "You're going to fight them," she said. "If I have to." He glanced at her, and she saw the calculation behind his eyes, weighing odds, assessing chances, preparing for violence. "The life debt protects you legally, but if they breach my home, laws become meaningless. It'll be survival." Another flicker. This time, Amara heard something, a sound like wind chimes, discordant and wrong, coming from everywhere and nowhere. "The outer ward just fell," Kieran said quietly. "They're at the building's threshold now." "How many?" "I can sense 4 distinct presences. Probably House Thorn enforcers." He moved to the apartment door, checking locks that suddenly seemed far too flimsy. "They'll send the strongest first to break the inner ward. Then they'll rush in together." Amara's mind raced. 4 vampires against 1. The math was simple and brutal. "You can't fight for vampires alone. I've survived worse odds." But his voice lacked conviction. He was 2 centuries old, trained in violence. She couldn't imagine. But he was also outnumbered and protecting. A liability her. The apartment had no back exit, no fire escape. They were trapped 7 floors up, with death climbing toward them. "There has to be another way," Amara said desperately. "Can you call someone? Other vampires who'd help?" "House Ash is scattered. Morrigan is in Europe, deliberately absent from this conflict. My closest ally is in California." Kieran's jaw clenched. "We're alone." The wind chime sound intensified, now accompanied by a low vibration that Amara felt in her bones. The inner ward was being torn apart piece by piece, unraveled by magic she couldn't see, but could feel, pressing against her skin like humidity before a storm. "I need you to listen very carefully," Kieran said, crossing back to her. He took her shoulders, his cold hands, surprisingly gentle. "When they break through, they'll come for you first. They know hurting you hurts me. If they take you hostage, I'll have no leverage. So what do I do? There's a panic room. Through that door, behind the bookshelf in my bedroom." He pressed something into her hand, a key, small and silver. "Lock yourself in. The room is warded separately, older magic, tied to bloodlines. They can't break it quickly. You'll be safe until I can drive them out or what?" Amara's fingers closed around the key. "Or until they kill you." Kieran's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "I've lived a very long time, Amara. If this is how it ends, protecting someone who showed me kindness, that's not the worst death I could imagine. That's not," she started. But the words died as the lights went out completely. Darkness swallowed them, absolute and suffocating. Amara felt Kieran's hands tighten on her shoulders, then release as he stepped away. She heard the whisper of his movement, the soft slide of the blade being raised. Then the door exploded inward, wood splintered, metal shrieked. 4 figures poured through the opening, moving with speed that defied physics. Amara caught glimpses in the chaos: pale faces, dark clothes, eyes that reflected the ambient city light like animals. Kieran met them in the center of the room. The violence was beautiful and terrible. He moved like water, like shadow, the blade in his hand singing as it caught moonlight through the gaps in the curtains. 1 vampire fell back, clutching his throat where silver had burned. Another hissed, circling, looking for an opening, but there were too many. Amara watched, frozen, as Kieran fought with the desperate grace of someone who knew he was losing. They drove him back toward the windows, coordinating their attacks with practiced efficiency. 1 got past his guard, raking claws across his ribs. Dark liquid blood, but wrong somehow. 2 dark stained his shirt. "Run!" Kieran shouted at her, his voice strained. The panic room, now. But Amara's feet wouldn't move. She stood paralyzed, watching the vampire who'd protected her being torn apart by his own kind. The key bit into her palm, sharp and useless. Then she saw it, the silver stake he'd left on the bookshelf when he'd retrieved the blade. 3 feet away, gleaming dully. Later, she wouldn't remember making the decision. Wouldn't remember crossing the room or picking up the weapon. She'd only remember the weight of it in her hand, surprisingly heavy. And the cold clarity that flooded through her as she realized what she was about to do. The vampire on Kieran's right was focused entirely on him, claws extended for a killing strike. She didn't see Amara approach from behind. Didn't see the stake rise. Amara drove it into the vampire's back with every ounce of strength she possessed. The scream that followed was inhuman, high and terrible, like metal tearing. The vampire convulsed, her body arching impossibly as silver burned through ancient flesh. She turned, her face contorted with rage and agony, reaching for Amara with claws that could shred her apart. Kieran was faster. He caught the dying vampire's arm, twisting with enough force to snap bone, and drove his blade through her heart. The body crumpled, already beginning to desiccate, skin drawing tight over bones as centuries of preserved life fled all at once. The remaining 3 vampires froze, their eyes fixed on their fallen companion. A human killed Sienna. One of them breathed, voice thick with disbelief. Immortal broke the blood. Kieran stepped in front of Amara, his blade raised, blood dripping from wounds that should have been fatal, but were already beginning to close. She's under my protection. Life debt. Witnessed by all present. Anyone who touches her commits not just assault, but oath breaking before the oldest laws. Celeste will have your head for this. Another vampire spat. Tell Celeste, Kieran said softly, dangerously, that if she wants me, she should come herself, instead of sending children to do her killing. For a long moment, nothing moved. The 3 remaining vampires exchanged glances, waited with calculation. Finally, the leader, a male with cold eyes and aristocratic features, nodded once. This isn't over. House Thorne doesn't forgive, doesn't forget. They moved as one, blurring toward the shattered doorway. In seconds, they were gone, leaving only the corpse of their companion and the wreckage of Kieran's home. Silence fell, broken only by Amara's ragged breathing. Kieran turned slowly to face her. His shirt was shredded, revealing pale skin marred by wounds that were sealing themselves as she watched. His gray eyes held something she couldn't name, shock, perhaps, or recognition. You stayed, he said quietly. You could have run, should have run, but you stayed and fought. The stake slipped from Amara's numb fingers, clattering to the floor. She looked down at her hands shaking, covered in residue from the vampire's disintegrating body. I couldn't let them kill you, she whispered. Kieran crossed the distance between them into strides and caught her as her legs gave out. His arms were cold but solid, holding her upright as delayed shock crashed through her system. You saved my life, he murmured against her hair. Again, do you understand what that means? Amara couldn't answer. Couldn't think beyond the adrenaline singing through her veins and the impossible reality that she'd just killed someone, something that had been alive for centuries. It means, Kieran continued softly, that you're bound to me now. Not by debt, but by blood spilled in defense. It means they'll come for you harder. It means everything just became infinitely more dangerous. He pulled back to look at her face, his eyes searching hers. And it means I will protect you with every breath I don't need to take. I swear it. Chapter 6. Blood and revelation. The body on Kieran's floor was nearly gone, reduced to bones and ash that crumbled at the slightest touch. Amara sat on the sofa, wrapped in a blanket, despite the fact that she couldn't seem to stop shaking, watching as Kieran swept the remains into a container with methodical efficiency. He'd changed shirts, his wounds fully healed now, leaving only dried blood as evidence of the violence. What happens to it? Amara asked, her voice hoarse. The body. I'll take it to neutral ground at midnight. Leave it where House Thorne can retrieve their dead. Kieran sealed the container, setting it aside with careful reverence. Despite everything, it's tradition. Respect for the fallen, even enemies. I killed her. The words felt foreign in Amara's mouth. I killed someone. Kieran crossed to her, kneeling so they were eye level. You killed a vampire who was about to kill me. There's a difference. Is there? Amara's hands clenched in the blanket. She was alive, immortal, but alive. And now she's dust because I drove silver through her back. Yes, his voice was gentle but firm. And if you hadn't, I would be dust, and you would be dead, or worse. Survival isn't murder, Amara. It's survival. She wanted to believe him, wanted to push away the image of the vampire's face as she'd turned, the shock and pain and rage before the light left her eyes. But it kept replaying, an endless loop behind her eyelids. Tell me about her, Amara said suddenly. Sienna, if I killed her, I should at least know who she was. Kieran was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of old memory. Sienna Thorne, turned in 1756 by Lysandra herself. She was a lady's maid in London, beautiful and clever, and Lysandra collected beautiful things. His expression darkened. She was loyal, brutal when commanded, but loyal. She deserved better than Lysandra's service, but you killed her anyway. I would have hesitated. You didn't. He met her eyes. That's what saved us both. You saw what needed to be done, and you did it, without philosophy or guilt weighing you down. That's rare. Amara laughed bitterly. I'm feeling the guilt now. Good. Kieran stood, moving to the shattered door. Guilt means you're not a monster. Monsters don't question their kills. He examined the splintered wood, running his fingers along the broken frame. We can't stay here. The wards are compromised. The door is destroyed, and House Thorne knows this location. We need to move. Move where? Amara pulled the blanket tighter. You said you were alone. That your house is scattered, mostly alone. He turned back to her, something calculating in his expression. But I do have one option. Someone who owes me a favor and might be willing to shelter us for a price. Another vampire? A witch? Kieran moved to the bookshelf, withdrawing a cell phone that looked absurdly modern in his hand. Margot Blackwood. She's neutral in house politics, maintains territory in the Garden District. If she agrees to host us, even House Thorne will think twice about attacking. Witches have their own protections. He dialed, putting the phone on speaker. It rang 3 times before a woman's voice answered, rich and amused. Kieran Ash. I wondered when you'd call. Margot. Kieran's tone was carefully neutral. I need sanctuary. For myself, and a human under my protection. A pause. You're calling in the debt, if I must. The woman Margot laughed softly. The vampire who refuses to owe anyone anything is calling in a 20-year-old favor. Things must be dire. House Thorne attacked my home tonight. They'll attack again. And the human? Margot's voice sharpened with interest. Who is she that you'd burn your only favor to protect her? Kieran glanced at Amara. Someone who saved my life. Twice. Someone who killed a Thorne vampire in my defense, an hour ago. Silence on the other end. When Margot spoke again, her amusement had vanished. A human killed one of Lysandra's progeny. That's unprecedented. Yes, bring her. The command was crisp. Come to my house before dawn. The protections here are strong, and I'm curious to meet a mortal brave enough or foolish enough to spill vampire blood. Thank you. Thank me when you survive this, Kieran. House Thorne doesn't forgive. Lysandra especially. The line went dead. Kieran pocketed the phone and turned to Amara. Pack anything you need. We leave in 10 minutes. Amara stood on shaking legs. I don't have anything to pack. Everything I own is either in my old apartment or worthless. Then we leave in 5 minutes. He moved toward his bedroom, returning moments later with a leather bag. I have clothing, some cash, identification documents. Everything else can be replaced. She watched him move through the apartment with practiced efficiency, gathering essentials with the ease of someone who'd fled danger many times before. It struck her then the fundamental difference between them. She was 26 years old, and this was the first time she'd truly run for her life. He was 247, and running was just another skill he'd perfected over centuries. Kieran, she said, as he secured the bag. What Margot said about House Thorne not forgiving. What does that mean? What will they do? He paused, his back to her. They'll escalate, send stronger vampires, possibly involve the council formally, force a trial where I have no allies. He turned, and his gray eyes were hard. And they'll come for you. Not just to kill you, but to make an example. To show what happens when humans interfere in vampire affairs. I'm sorry, Amara whispered. I'm sorry I helped you. I'm sorry I stayed. I'm sorry. Kieran crossed to her into strides and caught her face in his cold hands, forcing her to meet his gaze. Don't apologize for being decent in an indecent world. Don't apologize for having courage when I'd given up. But I've ruined your life. My life was already forfeit. His thumbs brushed her cheekbones, the gesture surprisingly tender. You gave me something I haven't had in decades, hope that maybe this world still has room for honor, for kindness, for someone willing to fight for a stranger. Amara's breath caught. This close, she could see flecks of silver in his gray eyes, could see the fine lines that spoke of his human life before immortality froze him in time, could see the loneliness that lived beneath his careful control. I don't feel courageous, she admitted. I feel terrified. Good. A ghost of a smile touched his mouth. Fear keeps you alive. Recklessness gets you killed. He released her and stepped back, shouldering the bag. Come. Margot's house is across the city, and we need to move while Thorn is regrouping. They'll expect us to run, but they won't expect us to seek witch protection. Amara followed him toward the destroyed door, her heart hammering. What do I call her? Margot? Miss Blackwood? Your witchness? That earned her a real smile, brief but genuine. Margot will suffice. She's not formal. Just don't lie to her. Witches can sense deception like vampires sense blood. Be honest. Be respectful, and try not to stare at the familiar. The what? You'll see. They descended the 7 flights in silence, Kieran moving with inhuman grace, while Amara's legs protested every step. The building seemed empty, dark, as if the violence upstairs had driven even the rats into hiding. Outside, the night was unseasonably cold. Kieran led her to a black car parked in the alley, expensive, understated. Exactly what she'd expect from a vampire with centuries of accumulated wealth. As he started the engine, Amara looked back at the building one last time. Somewhere up there was the apartment where she'd drunk coffee and read a vampire's diary and learned that monsters could be lonely. Somewhere up there was the ash of a woman she'd killed. No looking back, Kieran said softly, pulling into traffic. Only forward. That's the first rule of running. Amara faced forward, watching the city lights blur past the window. How many rules of running are there? Enough to fill to centuries. He navigated through empty streets with the confidence of someone who knew every shortcut, every shadow. But the most important one is this: trust the people who protect you, even when it's hard, even when every instinct screams to run alone. She glanced at him, at the profile limned by streetlights, at the hands steady on the wheel. Despite everything they'd just survived, I trust you, she said quietly. Kieran's hands tightened on the wheel, just slightly. Then we might actually survive this. The city opened before them like a maze of possibilities and dangers. And Amara realized with strange clarity that she was no longer running from her old life. She was running towards something new, something dangerous, something that felt terrifyingly like purpose. Chapter 7. The Witch's Bargain. Margot Blackwood's house stood at the end of a street that seemed to exist outside of time. While the surrounding neighborhood bore the marks of gentrification, renovated Victorians with fresh paint and modern fixtures, her property remained defiantly itself. Wrought iron gates framed a garden that grew wild and purposeful. Plants Amara didn't recognize, twisting together in patterns that made her eyes ache if she looked too long. The house itself was 3 stories of weathered brick and stained glass, windows glowing with warm light that somehow didn't spill beyond the property line. As Kieran pulled up to the gate, Amara felt something shift in the air, a pressure, like descending too quickly in an airplane, that made her ears pop. Words, Kieran said, noticing her discomfort. Witch magic feels different than vampire magic. More alive. The gate swung open before he could knock, groaning on hinges that hadn't been oiled in decades. They parked in a circular drive where moss grew between the cobblestones, and Amara noticed that no leaves had fallen on the property, despite the massive oak trees overhead. As if even nature knew to respect boundaries here, the front door opened as they approached, revealing a woman who defied every witch stereotype Amara had absorbed from movies and books. Margot Blackwood was perhaps 40, with deep brown skin, silver-streaked hair pulled into a high bun, and a burgundy silk robe that looked like it cost more than Amara's car. She held a glass of red wine in one hand and regarded them with eyes that seemed to see more than they should. Kieran Ash. Her voice was the same rich tone from the phone. You look like hell. Good to see you too, Margot. Kieran's tone held genuine warmth beneath the exhaustion. May we enter? You may. Margot stepped aside, then fixed her gaze on Amara. And you, little killer. What's your name? Amara's throat went dry. Amara Clark. Amara. Margot tasted the name like wine. You may enter my home as guest and ally, bound by the old laws of hospitality. Speak true, 'cause no harm, and you'll find sanctuary here. Betray my trust, and you'll wish you'd taken your chances with the thorns. It should have sounded dramatic, Instead, it landed with the weight of absolute truth. I understand, Amara said. Margot smiled, sharp and knowing. I believe you do. Come in, both of you. You're letting the night air disturb my protections. The interior of the house was a study in controlled chaos. Books lined every wall, stacked on surfaces and floors in a system that probably made sense to Margot alone. Crystals caught lamplight from seemingly random corners. Herbs hung drying from exposed beams, filling the air with scents both familiar and strange, lavender and rosemary alongside things that made Amara's nose itch. And curled on a velvet armchair was the largest black cat Amara had ever seen. It opened golden eyes to regard them with an intelligence that made her skin prickle. That's Silas, Margot said, following her gaze. My familiar. He won't bother you unless you're foolish enough to bother him first. The cat Silas yawned, displaying teeth that seemed to sharp, and closed his eyes again. Margot led them through the house to a sitting room that felt more normal, with comfortable furniture arranged around a fireplace that burned without visible fuel. She gestured for them to sit, then settled into her own chair with the grace of someone utterly at home in her domain. So, she began, swirling her wine. Tell me everything. And Kieran, before you start editing for my benefit, remember that I can taste lies in this house. Every word spoken here reveals its truth. Kieran glanced at Amara, something like apology in his eyes, then began. He told Margot about the council's ultimatum, his refusal to bond with Lysandra, the death sentence. He explained how Amara had hidden him at Obsidian Hall, how House Thorn had tracked her, how the life debt had formed when he reached the part. About the attack on his apartment, Margot leaned forward, her interest sharpening. Describe exactly how the human killed Sienna. Amara found her voice. I drove a silver stake through her back, into her heart, I think. She turned, and then Kieran, no, Margot interrupted. Before that, what were you feeling? What were you thinking? The question threw her. I don't know. I saw Kieran losing, saw them about to kill him, and I couldn't, her voice cracked. I couldn't let them. Not after he'd protected me. Not after. After he made you feel like you mattered, Margot finished softly. After months of feeling invisible, disposable, betrayed, he saw you, valued you, and you would have done anything to protect that. Tears burned Amara's eyes. Yes, Margot sat back, her expression unreadable. Interesting, very interesting indeed. She turned to Kieran. You realize what you have here, don't you? What she is. A brave human who saved my life, Kieran said carefully. More than that. Margot's eyes gleamed. She killed a vampire, Kieran, not through luck or accident, but through will. Silver doesn't burn vampire flesh on its own, it needs intent behind it. Belief. A mortal killed an immortal because she believed, with absolute conviction, that she could. What are you saying? Amara asked. I'm saying you have potential. Margot rose, moving to a bookshelf and withdrawing a leather-bound volume. Magic recognizes conviction. Power responds to belief. Most humans can't kill vampires because deep down, they don't truly believe they can. But you did, which means you have something rare, a will strong enough to bend reality. She opened the book to a page marked with ribbon. There are protections I can teach you, wards you can learn. Nothing that will make you a match for a vampire in direct combat, but enough to keep you alive. Enough to make you something more than prey. Amara's heart raced. You'd teach me magic? I'd teach you survival. Margot's expression was serious now. Because Kieran is right, House Thorn will escalate. They'll send their strongest, their most ruthless. And while the life debt offers legal protection, law means nothing when Lysandra wants revenge. If you're going to survive in Kieran's world, you need to be more than a liability he protects. You need to be a partner who can stand beside him. Kieran stood abruptly. Margot, this isn't necessary. You can what? Margot challenged. Fight off House Thorn alone? Protect her every moment of every night? You're powerful, Kieran, but even you have limits. She turned back to Amara. The question is, are you willing to learn? To change? To become something more than the woman who lost everything? Amara thought of her empty apartment, her stolen savings, her sister's betrayal. Thought of the last 6 months spent feeling small and stupid and worthless. Then she thought of the way Kieran had looked at her when she'd saved him, like she mattered, like she was brave. Yes, she said firmly. Teach me. Margot smiled, genuine warmth breaking through her theatrical mystique. Good. We start tomorrow at dusk. For tonight, you both need rest. The guest rooms are upstairs, second and third doors on the right. Bathroom is at the end of the hall. My wards will hold against anything House Thorn sends, so sleep without fear." She paused, then added more quietly, "And Amara, what you did tonight, killing to protect someone, that changes you. The guilt will ease, but you'll never be quite the same person you were. That's not a bad thing. Sometimes we need to break before we can rebuild ourselves stronger." Amara nodded, not trusting her voice. Kieran touched her elbow gently. "Come, you need rest." They climbed the stairs in silence. The second-floor hallway was lined with more books, more strange objects, a mirror that showed reflections slightly out of sync with reality, a painting of a garden that seemed to move when Amara wasn't looking directly at it. At the second door, Kieran paused. "This is you. I'll be next door if you need anything." "Kieran." Amara caught his arm before he could leave. "What Margot said about me having potential, is that true? Or is she just being dramatic?" He studied her face for a long moment. "I've lived for 2.5 centuries. I've seen thousands of humans face vampires. Most freeze, some run, a handful fight, and die quickly." His gray eyes held hers. "You're the first I've ever seen win. So yes, I believe Margot's right. You have something rare, something powerful." "I'm scared," Amara admitted. "Of what I did, of what I'm becoming." Fear and courage aren't opposites. Kieran's hand covered hers where it rested on his arm. "They're companions. The bravest people I've known were all terrified. They just didn't let fear stop them." He squeezed her hand once, then released it. "Sleep, Amara. Tomorrow, your real education begins." He disappeared into the neighboring room, leaving Amara alone in the hallway with her racing thoughts and the weight of everything that had changed. She entered her room to find it surprisingly normal: a comfortable bed, clean linens, a window that looked out over Margot's impossible garden. She collapsed onto the mattress fully clothed, too exhausted to care about propriety. As sleep pulled her under, her last thought was that somewhere in this city, Lysandra Thorne was planning her revenge. And somehow, that didn't terrify Amara quite as much as it should have. Chapter 8. Lessons in Fire and Shadow. Amara woke to sunlight streaming through gauze curtains and the smell of coffee drifting up from downstairs. For one blissful moment, she forgot where she was. Forgot the vampires and the killing and the impossible choice to learn magic from a witch she'd just met. Then, she saw her hands still faintly stained, despite washing them 3 times last night, and memory crashed back with brutal clarity. She found Margot in the kitchen, wearing jeans and a loose sweater, looking far more approachable than she had the night before. The witch was reading a newspaper, an actual physical newspaper, and sipping coffee from a mug that read "Witch, please," in flowing script. "There's breakfast," Margot said without looking up. "Help yourself." Kieran's already awake, brooding in the library. Vampires don't sleep during the day when they're stressed, despite what folklore says. They just become very still and very irritable. Amara poured coffee, found toast and jam, and settled at the kitchen table. Through the window, she could see Margot's garden in daylight, and it was even stranger than at night. Plants grew in spiral patterns, flowers bloomed in colors that shouldn't exist. And she could swear the oak tree in the center was watching her. "It is watching you," Margot said, still not looking up from her paper. "The oak is the heart of my wards. It's been here longer than the city, and it doesn't trust strangers. Can you read my mind?" "No, but I can read your face," and everyone stares at the oak the same way. Margot finally looked up, studying Amara with those to knowing eyes. "How do you feel this morning? Guilty? Traumatized? Ready to run back to your normal life?" Amara considered lying, then remembered what Margot had said about tasting deception. All of those things, but also curious. "If I have this potential you mention, I want to understand it." "Good answer." Margot folded her newspaper. "Finish your breakfast. We start in 20 minutes. The lesson took place in what Margot called her working room, a space in the basement that felt larger than it should, with stone walls covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly. A circle was painted on the floor in what looked like salt mixed with something darker. Candles burned at cardinal points, their flames unnaturally still. Kieran stood in the corner, arms crossed, watching with an expression Amara couldn't read. "Magic," Margot began without preamble, "is will made manifest. It's not about waving wands or speaking Latin, though both can help focus intent. It's about believing, with absolute conviction, that reality will bend to your desire." She gestured to the circle. "Step inside," Amara bade, feeling a subtle shift as she crossed the salt line, a tightening, like the air had become denser. What you did last night was instinctive magic, Margot continued. You needed the silver to kill, so you made it kill. You didn't think about it, didn't question it. You just believed. She moved around the circle, studying Amara from different angles. Today, we're going to teach you to do that consciously, to call on that conviction deliberately. How? Margot smiled. By setting you on fire. Amara's heart stopped. What? Metaphorically, mostly. Margot withdrew a black candle from her pocket and set it in the center of the circle. This candle is warded. It won't burn unless you will it to. Your task is simple: light it. No matches, no lighter. Just your belief that it should burn. I can't do that. Yes, you can. Margot's voice was sharp. You drove silver through a vampire's heart because you believed you could. This is the same principle, just more controlled. Focus on the candle. Visualize fire. Want it badly enough that reality has no choice but to comply. Amara stared at the candle. She felt ridiculous, like a child playing pretend. Fire required fuel, oxygen, ignition. It followed laws of physics that didn't care about her will or belief. Or you're thinking too much, Kieran said from his corner. His voice was quieter than Margot's, but it cut through her spiraling thoughts. When you saved me, you didn't think. You felt terror, determination, desperation. Magic responds to emotion more than logic. Amara closed her eyes, remembering the weight of the stake in her hand, the certainty that Kieran would die if she didn't act, the absolute conviction that she would not let that happen. She opened her eyes and stared at the candle. Burn, she thought. Then, more forcefully, burn. Nothing happened. Again, Margot commanded. Stop asking. Start demanding. Reality is just matter and energy following patterns. Your will can rewrite those patterns if you're strong enough. Amara gritted her teeth. She thought of Marcus, taking everything and leaving her with nothing. Thought of her sister's betrayal, her manager's disgust, the months of feeling invisible and worthless. Thought of House Thorne's vampires calling her a little witness like she was nothing but prey. Then she thought of Kieran's face when she'd saved him. The surprise and gratitude, and something else: respect. Heat built in her chest, spreading down her arms to her fingertips. The air in the circle shimmered. Burn. The candle's wick sparked. A small flame bloomed, blue at the base and gold at the tip, dancing in still air. Amara gasped, and the flame guttered out. Again, Margot said immediately. You had it. Now hold it. They worked for 2 hours. By the end, Amara could light the candle and keep it burning for nearly a minute before exhaustion broke her concentration. Her head pounded, her hands shook, and she felt like she'd run a marathon. Enough, Margot finally said. Magic has a cost: it drains you. Push too far, and you'll collapse, or worse. You did well for a first lesson. Amara stepped out of the circle and nearly fell. Kieran was there instantly, catching her arm and steadying her. Easy, he murmured. Sit before you fall. She sank onto a bench against the wall, her legs trembling. Is it always this exhausting? Until you build endurance. Yes, Margot was already cleaning up, extinguishing her own candles with casual waves of her hand. Magic is like any muscle: use it regularly, and it strengthens. Neglect it, and it atrophies. Kieran handed Amara a bottle of water. His cold fingers brushed hers, and she noticed he looked troubled. What? She asked. You're stronger than I expected, he said quietly. Most beginners take weeks to manage even a spark. You lit that candle in under an hour. Is that bad? It's dangerous. He glanced at Margot, who nodded grimly. Power attracts attention in the supernatural world. If word spreads that a human with magical potential is under my protection, it won't just be House Thorne coming for you. Other houses will want to recruit you, or eliminate you before you become a threat. Amara's stomach dropped. So I shouldn't learn magic? No, Kieran's voice was firm. You should learn everything Margot can teach you, as quickly as possible. Because you're already a target. Better to be a dangerous target than a helpless one. Margot crossed her arms. He's right. House Thorne won't wait for you to master defensive spells. They're probably planning their next move right now. We need to accelerate your training. How? Amara asked. Immersion. Margot's expression was serious. For the next 3 nights, you train with me. I'll teach you basic wards, how to sense vampire approach, how to disrupt their speed and strength with focused will. It won't make you invincible, but it'll make you survivable. And the nights after that? Amara looked between them. What happens when House Thorn attacks again? Kieran moved to the small window that looked out at ground level. Then we stop running. We make a stand. Force the council to acknowledge that what House Thorn is doing violates every law we have. Will the council listen? If we're still alive to testify? Maybe. He turned back, and Amara saw determination in his gray eyes. But first, we survive. Which means training, preparing, and hoping Lysandra underestimates us long enough for us to be ready. Margot checked her watch. It's nearly noon. Amara, you need food and rest. Real rest, not magically induced unconsciousness. Kieran, stop brooding and eat something. I know you fed recently, but stress makes vampires hungry. Kieran's jaw tightened. I'm fine. You're not. Margot's voice softened. And pretending otherwise won't help anyone. There's donated blood in the refrigerator, medical grade. Drink it before you start eyeing your human companion like a meal. Heat flooded Amara's face. She hadn't thought about Kieran feeding, hadn't considered that protecting her meant being close to her, breathing in her scent, hearing her heartbeat. While fighting his most basic instinct, I'll manage, Kieran said tightly. Kieran, Amara stood on, shaking legs. If you need blood, I can. No, the word was sharp, almost harsh. He closed his eyes, visibly collecting himself. Thank you. But no, I don't feed from unwilling donors or people under my protection. It would violate everything I believe about consent. I'm offering consent, offered under duress. Under obligation. He opened his eyes, and she saw the hunger there, carefully controlled, but undeniable. That's not freely given. That's coercion by circumstance. So no, Amara, I'll drink the medical supply and be fine. The tension in the room was suffocating. Finally, Margot clapped her hands once. Right. Kieran, kitchen. Amara, upstairs. Rest. We reconvene at dusk for lesson 2, as Amara climbed the stairs, her legs still trembling from magical exertion. She heard Margot's voice drift up from below. She cares about you. You know. I know. Kieran's reply was barely audible. That's what terrifies me. Chapter 9. The storm before 3 days passed in a blur of training, exhaustion, and growing dread. Amara learned to weave basic wards, invisible barriers that could slow a vampire's approach or deflect their strength for crucial seconds. She learned to sense their presence, that peculiar cold that preceded them like a warning. She learned that magic left her hollow and shaking, but also exhilarated in a way she'd never experienced. And she learned that Kieran was avoiding her. It was subtle at first. He'd watch her training sessions from progressively farther corners of Margot's working room. He'd time his feeding to when she was occupied. He'd speak to her with careful politeness that felt like distance made manifest. On the 4th night, Amara found him alone in Margot's library, surrounded by books he wasn't reading. You're hiding from me, she said, without preamble. Kieran didn't look up. I'm giving you space to focus on your training. Liar. She crossed the room and sat in the chair opposite him. Margot says this house reveals truth. So tell me, why are you avoiding me? He finally met her eyes, and she saw exhaustion there. Not physical. Vampires didn't tire that way, but something deeper. Soul weariness. Because every moment I spend near you, I'm fighting 2 wars, he said quietly. One against House Thorn, and one against myself. I don't understand, don't you? He leaned forward, his gray eyes intense. You're human, Amara, warm and alive, and your heart beats loud enough that I hear it constantly. Your blood smells like. He stopped, jaw clenching. I've spent 2 centuries learning control, building discipline, and 3 days with you has made me question every rule I've set for myself. Heat flooded through Amara's body. Is that why you won't feed from me? Because you're attracted to me? I won't feed from you because it would be an abuse of power. You're vulnerable, dependent on my protection, and offering yourself out of obligation or gratitude. His voice was strained. But yes, the attraction makes it worse, makes the hunger worse, makes everything infinitely more complicated. She should have been frightened, should have recognized the danger in a predator admitting he wanted to consume her. Instead, she felt something else entirely, a pull, magnetic and undeniable, toward this ancient creature who fought his nature to protect hers. What if it's not obligation? She asked softly. What if I trust you? Then you're a fool. But his eyes said something different. Trusting vampires gets humans killed. You haven't killed me yet. Yet, he stood abruptly, putting the chair between them like a barrier. Amara, I'm trying to do the right thing. trying to protect you without taking advantage. Don't make it harder than it already is. Before she could respond, Margot's voice echoed through the house, sharp with urgency. Kieran, Amara, downstairs. Now. They found Margot in her working room, standing before a scrying mirror that showed an image of Kieran's destroyed apartment building. In the reflection, vampires moved through the wreckage, 5 of them, dressed in formal black, examining every corner with methodical precision. House Thorn, Kieran said, his voice deadly calm. They're searching for clues about where we went. More than that, Margot gestured. And the mirror's perspective shifted to show a vampire holding something small. Amara's jacket, the one she'd left behind. They have your scent now. They can track you. Amara's blood went cold. How long until they find us? My wards will hide you from magical tracking, but scent tracking is different. Older, more primal. Margot's expression was grim. I'd say you have until tomorrow night. Maybe less. Then we leave, Kieran said immediately. Find somewhere else to hide. There is nowhere else. Margot closed the scrying mirror with a wave. Every neutral territory in the city is monitored. Any vampire who shelters you will become a target. And humans can't hide from vampires who have your scent. Not for long. So what do we do? Amara heard the tremor in her own voice. Wait here and fight when they come? Yes. Kieran's jaw was set. We make our stand. Force them to attack on ground we've prepared. Better than being caught in the open. Margot nodded slowly. My wards will give you an advantage, and Amara's basic shields might buy crucial seconds. But you're still facing multiple thorn vampires, probably including Celeste. The odds aren't good. They never are. Kieran turned to Amara, and she saw something fierce in his eyes. But we're not defenseless. And we're not alone. Between your magic, Margot's protections, and my experience, we have a chance. A slim chance, Margot corrected. I won't fight beside you. Which neutrality in house conflicts is absolute. But I'll maintain the wards and give you every advantage this house can offer. After that, survival is up to you. Amara's hands clenched at her sides. 4 days ago, she'd been a waitress with a broken life. Now she was preparing to fight vampires in a witch's house, using magic she barely understood. The absurdity of it should have made her laugh. Instead, she felt oddly calm, centered, ready. Teach me more, she said to Margot. Whatever you can before they come. I won't be helpless. Margot studied her for a long moment, then nodded with something like approval. All right, we'll focus on offensive magic, ways to disrupt vampire speed, to burn them with concentrated will. It'll drain you quickly, but if used right, it might be enough. They worked through the night. Margot pushed her harder than before, showing her how to channel magic through her hands like weapons, how to create brief bursts of force that could knock back creatures stronger than her. Amara's head throbbed, her body ached, but she pushed through the exhaustion. Kieran watched from the doorway, and every time she glanced at him, she saw the war playing out across his face, pride and fear, and something else she was beginning to recognize. Dawn came too quickly. Margot called a halt, and Amara collapsed against the wall, gasping. You're improving, Margot said, which was high praise from her. Not enough to survive alone, but enough to be useful in a fight. Rest today. Tomorrow night, we prepare the house for siege. Amara nodded, too exhausted to speak. Kieran helped her upstairs, his cold hand steady against her back. To her door, she caught his wrist. Kieran, if we don't survive this, don't. His voice was rough. Don't say goodbye. Don't make this harder. I need you to know. She struggled for words. Whatever happens, I don't regret helping you. I don't regret any of this. Something cracked in his careful control. He cupped her face in his cold hands, his gray eyes searching hers with an intensity that stole her breath. I have lived 147 years, he said quietly. I've seen empires fall and cities burn. I've loved and lost and learned to be alone. And in 4 days, you've made me feel more human than I have in a century. Is that good or bad? I don't know. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. But I know I will fight to keep you alive. We'll do whatever it takes. Even if it means. He stopped himself, jaw clenching. Even if it means what? Amar whispered. Even if it means becoming the monster I've spent centuries trying not to be. He released her and stepped back. Sleep, Amara. Tomorrow we find out if hope is enough. He disappeared into his room, leaving Amara trembling in the hallway. She entered her own room and moved to the window, looking out over Margot's impossible garden. The oak tree at its center stood sentinel, its branches moving in wind she couldn't feel. Tomorrow night, House Thorn would come, would test every ward, every spell, every ounce of courage she'd found in the last 4 days, and Amara realized she wasn't just fighting to survive anymore. She was fighting for something, someone worth surviving for. The thought terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. She'd entered Kieran's world by accident, but somewhere along the way, she'd chosen to stay. Chosen him. Chosen this strange, dangerous life over the safe emptiness she'd left behind, outside. The sun climbed higher, driving vampires into rest and humans into daylight routines that suddenly seemed impossibly distant. Amara lay down, still dressed, and closed her eyes. When she slept, she dreamed of fire and shadow, of gray eyes watching her from darkness, of a voice promising protection, even as the world burned around them. And in the garden below, the oak tree's branches twisted tighter, preparing for the storm it sensed coming. Chapter 10. Blood and Belonging. The attack came at midnight, when the wards were strongest and Margot's power thrummed through every stone of her house. Amara felt them first, that bone-deep cold that preceded vampires like a winter wind. She was in the working room with Kieran, both of them tense and waiting. When the temperature dropped 10 degrees in seconds, "They're here," she whispered. Kieran moved to the window, his body coiled with predatory grace. "6 of them. Celeste is leading," and his expression darkened. "Lysandra is with them. The heir herself?" Margot appeared in the doorway, Silas twining around her ankles. "That's either a compliment or a death sentence." "Possibly both." The front gate exploded inward with a sound like thunder. Margot's wards flared, visible golden light cascading across the property line, pushing back against the vampires trying to force entry. But even from inside, Amara could see the wards buckling under concentrated assault. "They brought a blood witch," Margot hissed. "Someone powerful enough to counter my protections." "How long will the wards hold?" Kieran asked. "Minutes. Maybe less." Margot's hands wove patterns in the air, reinforcing defenses that were already failing. "When they breach the house, you're on your own." "Neutrality binds me." Kieran turned to Amara. "Stay behind me. Use your magic only if you have a clear shot." "Don't." The front door shattered. Vampires poured through like smoke, moving with inhuman speed. Celeste led them, her beautiful face twisted with rage. Behind her came others, all bearing the formal black of House Thorn, and at the rear, moving with the casual confidence of absolute power, came Lysandra. She was stunning in the way of apex predators' sharp features. Dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble, eyes that held centuries of cruelty. She wore a burgundy dress that looked like spilled wine, and when she smiled, her fangs gleamed white. "Kieran Ash." Her voice was silk over steel. "Still running with your pet human. How disappointing." "Lysandra." Kieran positioned himself between her and Amara. "This is neutral ground. You're violating, I'm violating nothing." Lysandra gestured, and the vampires spread out, surrounding them. "The witch's wards are broken. Her house is no longer sanctuary. Which means you're simply trespassing with a human who killed one of mine." She fixed her gaze on Amara, and the weight of it was crushing. "Hello, little killer. I'm going to enjoy making you scream." Amara felt fear spike through her, but beneath it, something else ignited. The same conviction that had driven Silver through Sienna's heart. The same belief that had lit Margot's candle. "You'll have to get through Kieran first," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Oh, I'm counting on it." Lysandra's smile widened. "Watching him fail to protect you will be exquisite." "Enough talking." Kieran's voice dropped to something inhuman. "If you want her, you go through me. And I promise some of you won't survive the attempt." Lysandra laughed, and it was a terrible sound. "Attack." The vampires moved as one. Kieran met them with violence that took Amar's breath away. He was no longer the careful, controlled creature who'd knelt before her in his apartment. He was ancient and lethal, moving faster than her eyes could track, the curved blade in his hand singing as it found flesh. One vampire fell, throat opened. Another stumbled back, clutching a wound that steamed and burned from Silver. But there were too many, and Kieran was being driven back, step by step, toward where Amara stood, frozen. "Move," she told herself. "Do something." She raised her hands and channeled magic the way Margot had taught her, will made manifest. Belief turned to force. Fire erupted from her palms, not real flames, but concentrated energy that burned like them. It caught Celeste in the chest, and the vampire shrieked, stumbling backward with surprise more than pain. But it bought Kieran a crucial second. He spun, dispatching another attacker with brutal efficiency. Good, he shouted. Again, Amara tried, but the magic was draining her too quickly. Her second attempt was weaker, barely singing Celeste's sleeve. Her third attempt produced nothing but exhaustion that made her knees buckle. Lysandra watched with amusement. Impressive for a human, but ultimately futile. She moved then, faster than anything Amara had seen. One moment she stood across the room. The next, she had Kieran by the throat, slamming him against the wall with force. That cracked stone. You could have had everything, Lysandra hissed. Power, immortality, a place at my side. Instead, you chose death for some wounded human who'll be dust in decades. Kieran's hands clawed at her grip, but even his strength couldn't break her hold. She's worth more than 1,000 years. At your side. How sweet. Lysandra's free hand traced his jaw almost tenderly. I'll make sure she watches you die. Slowly, Amara's vision blurred with tears and rage. This couldn't be how it ended. After everything, after fighting and learning and choosing this dangerous new life, she couldn't just watch Kieran die. The memory surfaced unbidden. Margot's words from their first lesson. Magic is will made manifest. Believing with absolute conviction that reality will bend to your desire, Amara looked at her empty hands, at the vampires surrounding them, at Kieran struggling in Lysandra's grip, his gray eyes finding hers across the chaos, and she believed, not in fire or force or defensive wards. She believed in something simpler and more powerful, that Kieran Ash would not die tonight, that she wouldn't allow it, that reality itself would have to break before she'd let him fall. Power erupted from her like a shockwave. It wasn't controlled, wasn't refined. It was pure conviction turned to magic, and it hit every vampire in the room like a physical blow. They staggered, Lysandra included, her grip on Kieran loosening just enough. Kieran didn't waste the opening. He drove his silver blade up under Lysandra's ribs, into the space where a human heart would be. She screamed, actually screamed, and released him, stumbling backward with silver burning through her ancient flesh. Retreat. She snarled at her vampires. Now. They fled as quickly as they'd come, Celeste supporting Lysandra, leaving 2 of their dead behind. In seconds, the room was empty except for corpses and the ringing silence of aftermath. Amara collapsed. Kieran caught her before she hit the ground, pulling her against his chest. His hands shook as they cradled her head, and when she looked up, she saw something like wonder in his face. What did you do? He whispered. Believed, she managed. Believed you wouldn't die, Amara. His voice cracked. That much power, you could have killed yourself. Burned out completely. But I didn't. She touched his face, her fingers warm against his cold skin. We survived. Margot appeared in the doorway, Silas at her heels, surveying the destruction with a low whistle. Well, that was extraordinary. Foolish and dangerous and completely extraordinary. Kieran lifted Amara more securely in his arms. She needs rest. Medical attention. She needs you to stop arguing with what just happened. Margot's expression was knowing. She bound herself to you, Kieran, not with blood or ritual, but with will and belief and magic powerful enough to shake my wards. That kind of connection doesn't break easily. Kieran looked down at Amara, and she saw everything he'd been holding back playing across his face. Fear and hope and longing, and something that looked terrifyingly like love. I don't deserve this, he said quietly. Don't deserve you. Too bad. Amara smiled despite her exhaustion. You're stuck with me now. He carried her upstairs to her room, laying her gently on the bed. As he moved to leave, she caught his hand. Stay, she whispered. Please, Amara, I almost watched you die tonight. Don't make me sleep alone afterward. Something in him surrendered. He settled on the bed beside her, careful not to touch more than necessary, and she curled against his side. His body was cold, but she'd stopped minding. Cold meant safe. Cold meant Kieran. House Thorn will come again, he said quietly. Lysandra won't forgive this. I know. You could still leave. Return to your human life. What human life? Amara's fingers traced idle patterns on his chest. I killed a vampire. Learned magic. Chose this. Chose you. His arm tightened around her. This won't be easy. The houses will always see you as a threat or a prize. And I'm your vampire who fights his nature to be honorable. Who protected me when he could have abandoned me, who made me feel like I mattered. She looked up at him. That's enough. Kieran's gray eyes held hers for a long moment. Then slowly, carefully, He leaned down and pressed his lips to her forehead, a kiss that held 2 centuries of loneliness and 4 days of connection and a promise of something neither dared name yet. Then I'll teach you, he murmured. Everything about my world. The rules, the dangers, the beauty hiding in darkness. And we'll face whatever comes together. Together, Amara agreed, and felt the words settle like truth. Outside, dawn approached. House Thorn retreated to lick their wounds and plan revenge. The council would eventually demand answers. The vampire world would whisper about the human who'd stood against Lysandra Thorne and survived, but in Margot's house, wrapped in borrowed safety and fragile hope, Amara closed her eyes and let herself believe in one impossible thing, that broken people could find each other in darkness. That monsters could choose to be more. That a waitress who'd lost everything could gain something infinitely more valuable, a place to belong, and as sleep claimed her. Kieran's cold hand warm in hers, she knew with absolute conviction, this was only the beginning, the end.